Well, it's the third Sunday in August, and in the Unity Movement, of course, August marks the birth dates of our co-founders Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. Here they are up there with their birth dates, August 22nd and August 6th. This gives us an opportunity. I mean, we get to spend the entire month of August looking at our roots and the ideas that have given Unity a really unique perspective in the world of religion and spirituality. And so far, this month, we've talked about the Fillmore Legacy and how that legacy has been able to move forward and grow in step with all of the changes that are brought about by our expanding knowledge of this world and the universe around us. Now, last week I started with a quote from Charles Fillmore where he explains how Unity doesn't require belief or what we might call blind faith in anything that can't be proven. And here's the gist of the quote. He says, "Unity does not in any manner partake of the popular concept of religion as a vague something which has to be accepted on faith and believed regardless of its consistencies. On the contrary, it invites the closest mental scrutiny." Now that's an idea that's basically a theme that we find in several of Charles Fillmore's works. For example, in 1918, he wrote an article that had the title, "The Pure Reason and Honest Logic of Practical Christianity." Now, I mentioned last week that Charles and Myrtle, they chose the right state to settle in because Missouri, of course, as you recall, is known as the show me state. And that seemed to be Charles' mantra, show me. Demanding the closest mental scrutiny and the application of pure reason and honest logic are essential parts of a process that's known as critical thinking. Show me. I have been a long-time advocate of this process, critical thinking, but not without meeting with some resistance. Many Unity folks seem to have an allergic reaction to the word critical. Critical. A critic. A foul-tempered grouch who just wants to bash something and be all negative, right? Isn't that kind of the image that we get? Our pop culture sort of reflects that back to us. Now there are people who are truly like that. Don't get me wrong, they exist. But we have another word for them today. We call them trolls. Trolls. Trolls who live under the bridges and the various structures of the internet. Troll make internet mad. Troll like anger. Troll want people as miserable as troll. Their sole reason for existing is to stir up trouble on the internet and get a rise out of people. And trolls are one of the reasons why you'll hear me say, never read the comments to an article or a post on the internet. Never read them unless you're first aware of trolls and are prepared to ignore them, because the only way to deal with a troll is do not feed the troll. Do not feed the troll. Trolls will only stay when they're fed or given attention. So please do not pet, respond to, or feed trolls. Doing so only results in their prolonged stay. All right. So, critical thinking has nothing to do with being a critic or a troll or anything else negative that we can think of. And I found a short video here. It runs about 2.5 minutes. And Karen is back there getting it up. And I think this video does a great job of explaining just exactly what we're talking about and what we mean by critical thinking. And so it's on its way. I think she's got it.
Critical thinking is all about asking questions. The right questions. Questions that help you assess both the meaning and the significance of claims and arguments. Building these skills and applying them in your life makes it easier for you to assess evidence, evaluate arguments, and adapt your thinking so you stay switched on and engaged in different situations. Critical thinking involves stepping back from a situation to enable you to see all the angles before making judgments or taking decisions. It means identifying the key points, analyzing the sources of information, weighing up different types of evidence, just as a judge and jury would do in a court of law, and putting it all together into your own independent, thought-through point of view. One thing that it's very important to realize is that critical thinking isn't about being critical. And it's about much more than just finding flaws in other people's claims. By itself, that isn't enough to give you an edge. To be a true critical thinker means being creative, reflective, and adaptable, evaluating the evidence to decide for yourself what is accurate, what is relevant, and do I have sufficient information to take a decision on this topic? Thinking critically means taking a stand for yourself. It can be difficult not to be swayed by close family or friends' views on things, or certain beliefs that just feel right. But learning how to use these higher order thinking skills can help you to feel much more confident in your own opinions and conclusions. Critical thinking is also about a sense of discovery and excitement, not only about learning, but evaluating arguments to see how they stand up, and filtering for yourself what resonates as right or wrong. By using these techniques, you'll find yourself becoming a clearer, better thinker. McCat, learn better, think smarter, aim higher.
All right, short and
Grammarly
sweet.
does more than catch errors.
And now the commercial. Got to sit through one of those these days, although Jacob has it set up back there so he's got a YouTube account that has no commercials. We don't know how to get into it, so anyway. Oh good, that's over. Critical thinking. So when I watch that video, I think of all those things that Charles Fillmore was talking about. That's
With
what he's
Grammarly,
getting at.
you can find really good.
And you need to turn the audio channel off. There you go. Thank you. They're persistent, aren't they? I mean, my goodness. You've got a link in the bulletin. There's a handout in your bulletin. Contains links to this outfit called McCat. There's all sorts of good stuff on that website. I wish we actually taught critical thinking skills in our schools as a separate and distinct class, rather than just incidentally as part of the science curriculum. I mean, you get the basics of it, but it's always incidental to other things. You can teach this as a distinct class, and you know, hey, I don't have any kids who are in school, so maybe they're starting to do that now. Any educators out there who can give me not a hand? Nobody can give me any. Okay, well then we got our work cut out for us, right? Critical thinking skills are important. I didn't get that kind of education as a child, and if I had to design a curriculum for teaching critical thinking skills, and this would be at the high school reading level, there's a book that I would require. Let's see if we got it up here in the next slide. Yes, this is the book that for me would be required reading. One of my all-time favorites. It's called The Demon Haunted World, Science as a Candle in the Dark. That was written back in 1996 by the late, great Carl Sagan. And in this book, he has this wonderful story that illustrates one of several ways we can go about using critical thinking skills. And it's memorable because the story itself is a bit whimsical, but it's always presented with humor and with a gentle hand. That was something that Carl Sagan really excelled at, teaching us how to engage in critical thinking without being jerks. That's just to put it bluntly. So, I'm going to give you this scenario. Here it is. I want you to imagine that someone walks up to you and says that a fire-breathing dragon lives in his garage. What would you do? I know what some of you are thinking, right? Run the other way, right? Especially if it's somebody you didn't know very well, you might start putting on some distance, you know, say, oh yeah, get me out of here, you know. But just suppose this was somebody you were acquainted with. They didn't seem dangerous. What an opportunity, right? Remember that part in the little video? They talked about how it's about excitement and finding some joy in exploring. What an opportunity. There have been ancient stories of fire-breathing dragons, but no real evidence. So what do you say? You say, show me. Show me, right? That's one of the positive hallmarks of critical thinking. It can involve curiosity and creativity when it's at its best. Show me. It's a reasonable request, right? So, he leads you to his garage. You open the door, you look inside, and there's the usual garage stuff. Paint cans, a bicycle, golf clubs, but no dragon. So, you ask another very reasonable question. Where's the dragon? And the guy answers, oh, she's right here, but I neglected to tell you she's invisible. All right, well, you've come all this way, so you ask, well, you have some flour in the kitchen. Let's go get a bag of flour, and we're going to scatter the flour on the garage floor, right, so that we can at least see the dragon's footprints as it's walking around in the garage. Brilliant. There's some of that creativity that's involved here. And the guy says, wow, that's a great idea, except this dragon floats in the air. By the way, this guy is engaging in a technique that you'll run into from time to time called moving the goalposts. That's what that is. So, you then offer to go get one of those infrared heat detector guns so that you can detect the invisible dragon fire. And the guy says, wow, that's a great idea too, only the fire is totally heatless. All right? So you say, all right, fine, this has got to do it. We're going to get some non-toxic spray paint, and we'll spray it, and we'll make her visible. And he says, yeah, that's another great idea, but she's an incorporeal dragon. Paint won't stick. All right? By now you see where this is going. And this is common in different fields. And you might be wondering this. What is the difference between an invisible, incorporeal, floating dragon who spits heatless fire and no dragon at all? Would it be reasonable to believe the person who says there's a dragon in that garage? You can if you want to, but has this person delivered what they promised? Did you find a fire-breathing dragon experience, or was it just an exercise in imagination? What was he claiming? That there was a fire-breathing dragon in his garage. Did he deliver? Well, speaking for myself, and that's really all I can ever do, speaking for myself, I would be justified in rejecting that claim. In fact, I would consider myself required to at least tentatively reject that claim unless and until there is additional evidence. Now, I can tell you that this approach certainly makes life a lot easier because I don't have to have this stuff cluttering up my brain. I don't have to go around finding ways to defend the claim because the burden is on the person making the claim. They didn't sustain their burden of proof. I'm done with it. Makes life a lot easier. Now how often do we apply that same standard of proof to the claims that are made in the name of religion or spirituality? How often do we get out the bag of flour, the heat detector, the spray paint, and say, show me, and really mean it? You know, my friend with the garage dragon, he might be the nicest person in the world, trustworthy and loyal in every way, and he may sincerely believe there's a dragon in the garage, but his belief, his unproven claim, is of no practical value to me or anyone else that I can think of. As I've said before, I will be open-minded, and what would change my mind would be some new evidence. We want to have an open mind, but not so open that our brains fall out on the floor. Splat. That's a quote that Carl Sagan uses, although we really don't know who exactly said it first. You look it up and it's attributed to a whole bunch of people. A lot of people use it. It's a great quote. To say that there's a fire-breathing dragon living in our garage is what you might call an extraordinary claim. And another thing that Carl Sagan used to say was this: extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof or extraordinary evidence. Now, if instead of telling me that there was a fire-breathing dragon in his garage, my friend would have simply told me that, oh, I had cereal for breakfast, I don't think I'd have said, show me, right? I mean, that's not exactly an extraordinary claim. Okay, fine, let that go by. And in addition to the extraordinary claims requiring extraordinary evidence, there is a corollary to that that was offered by Christopher Hitchens. This is sometimes known as Hitchens' razor. He says, what can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. The person making the claim has the burden of presenting the evidence. You are not required to disprove it. If the headline on a news site claims there's a dragon living in the garage, don't shout fake news. Ask them for their evidence. And if they tell you to go do your own research, you are justified in simply dismissing the claim. There's no need to expend any additional energy, which, as I said before, can really simplify our lives. And it also makes it a lot easier to ignore the trolls on the internet, because they rarely deliver the goods. They just want to get a rise out of you. That's it. So all of these ideas that we've been talking about, the ones we've heard on the video and Charles Fillmore and the story of the dragon in the garage, they're all part of something that Carl Sagan called a baloney detection kit. Dogs are real good at detecting baloney, especially in sandwiches, but everyone needs some kind of baloney detection kit. Now, we don't have time this morning to go into it in detail. There's a whole list of different things here, but what we've done is given you a quick summary in the handout that contains the essential elements here. So the first thing we want to do, as I mentioned, is to focus on the claim being made. Get very clear about exactly what is being claimed, because the more specific the claim is, the easier it is to address. Is this claim capable of being disproven? The fancy term they use for it is it falsifiable? Can the claim be disproven, or is it like the dragon in the garage, forever shifting and receding and eluding? Second, consider the source. Now, this may come as a big surprise to some of you, but in case you didn't know it, Fox News and MSNBC have agendas. Beware of someone who is both selling a supplement and claiming it's scientifically proven to do something. Look for some kind of independent examination of the claim, not from somebody who has something to sell or who has an agenda. Next, number 3, what exactly is the evidence? Anecdotes don't cut it. My brother-in-law was talking to a guy at work who actually saw Bigfoot. Not evidence of Bigfoot. Now, if somebody cites a published study of some kind, at least read the abstract. And then find out if someone with similar expertise reviewed the article and look at what they have to say about the techniques, the methodology, the statistics, and things like that. Fourth, has the claim been tested independently and then verified by repetition? Because an experiment that proves something once isn't enough. It's that repeatability that is the gold standard. And finally, number 5, after completing the foregoing steps, see if you can formulate your own conclusion. And even then, don't be overly attached to it. Treat it as provisional, because there could be additional evidence which would cause you to change your mind. Now, I'm going to add a last one here. We'll call it number 6, which I touched on last week briefly. Maintain a healthy level of humility. That's always a good idea. Be humble. Nobody likes an arrogant critic, whether we call it critical thinking or not. Humility is important. James Randi, some of you may know who he is. He's a retired stage magician who also made a career out of exposing people who claim to have supernatural powers. And he exposed, and I will say embarrassed, some really big names in that area. One of them was Peter Popoff, who was a faith healer, claimed to be a psychic faith healer. James Randi caught him on stage wearing a little earpiece where he was receiving radioed information that somebody was giving him about the people that he was supposedly doing these psychic readings and healings on. And the other guy was Uri Geller, the man who claimed that he could bend spoons with his mind. Well, James Randi watched him a couple of times and then duplicated the same trick because he's a magician. He knows how these things are done. So from 1964, 64 must be 94, from 1994 to 2015, he offered to pay $1 million to anyone who could demonstrate those kind of powers under controlled conditions. Over 1,000 people applied, none were successful, all right? Despite his success in doing these things, this is one of his maxims. He says, no matter how smart or well-educated you are, you can be deceived. And he includes himself among those who can be deceived. We all fall prey to bogus claims, and it's important to remember that it's not a moral failing or a weakness of any kind. Critical thinking can be balanced and needs to be balanced with humility and kindness. And I think the Fillmores have produced a great example of what can be accomplished when we do exactly that. Balance critical thinking with humility and kindness. Join us next week and we'll wrap up our series. See you then.